International Relations at Wits University, Professor John Stremlau. Thank you so very much, Prof, for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon.
Where are we now in terms of prosecutions for those involved in the January 6th insurrection one year later? And let's not forget the fact that there are still people, Trump supporters, Republicans, claiming that the elections were rigged, that the election was indeed stolen from them. Where are we now in the U.S.?
Well, that's a very good question, because we are seeing unfold a long overdue political crisis that is a function of the fact that America is not a full democracy. It never has been, and it certainly is showing its democratic deficits right now. It wasn't by accident that O.R. Tambo and the other founders of this Constitution here did not want to make some of the mistakes that were built into the U.S. democratic Constitution, ostensibly, that privileged minority groups, white minority states in the South and in the Midwest, that are now trying to take over a state capture of sort. And that's what's really at stake in the January 6th outpouring of violence. Now, the Attorney General last night, and I listened to him very carefully, talked about two things. One, the prosecutions, which are going forward. There are about 700 of them. There's going to be more, and they're going to pursue the facts wherever they go, he assured everyone, so that you have some trust in the judicial system, which is a lot more politicized than it is here. And I think that is one track. But Garland also, the Attorney General, also talked about voting rights as a second part of his big attention. And the President of the United States, I hope, will talk about the democratic deficits that are occurring when equal voting rights are not honored in this U.S. democratic system. The Electoral College overweights the minority Republicans right now. They are also suppressing votes in many congressional districts around the country. It's a polarized country, and it's in crisis. And the world knows it. And Cyril Ramaphosa knows it. That's why he chose not to go to the Biden Democracy Summit, for heaven's sakes. I mean, South Africa is one of the best democracies in the world. And you just had an illustration of that in the debate going on over the Women's League, the ANC Women's League. So that you see a very lively and open democracy here. It's not that case in the United States right now.
Prof, we keep hearing from U.S. government and the incumbent that, January 6th was one of the greatest threats to America. And I wonder, can you possibly say that when nobody has been charged or prosecuted, not one family member of Trump, not one administration or staff in the year long that it's been, I mean, it's exactly a year now, and we're still talking about, whether or not people should be prosecuted or not for what happened. Surely something should have been cast in stone at this point. I mean, I know that, we're talking a lot about impeachment, and of course that failed. But moving forward then, I mean, it paints a very bad precedent if nothing and nobody's prosecuted for this.
Well, now, you've got to be careful here, because there are prosecutions for criminal action under the criminal code. And that's what's being done with regard to those who were responsible for the violence on January 6th. The president, in inspiring this assault, has some culpability, but it's political. It's not easily judiciated. And what is going to happen is there's going to have to be a legislative reforms to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. And secondly, that public is going to have to come around to some sort of an accommodation, because if they continue down this track and the Republicans are capable of enshrining minority rule through the Electoral College, then the majority that is excluded from this process will be extremely unhappy. You talked about some statistics earlier. 70% of Americans, according to recent polling, do not have confidence in their government. That's a terrible indictment on a democracy which is reliant on trust. But the big lie that Trump has perpetrated about the 2020 election is indicative of a new spirit of revolt in the Republican hard line, the white Christian rural voters who feel they're losing status as America becomes to look more like South Africa, a diverse country. And as a result, you've got to slow down and have a serious democratic dialogue about the future of democracy in America, which is not going to be ethnic nationalist as it's been since its founding. It was founded by white ethnic nationalists, and it's been that way for 250 years. And this is a defining moment. And the 2024 election and the 2022 congressional election later this year, are going to be two big benchmarks along this road of whether or not it can be a fully democratic nation or not. And perhaps Americans will come to their senses, but perhaps not. And then the rest of the world has to move on. But I think it would help South Africa to have a credible democracy in the United States, and it doesn't have to have one now. And the ANC knows this.
Prof. Stremlau, one of the things I hate to do is entertain crazy conspiracy theories, but I want to bring what happened January 6th at Capitol Hill to what's now happened in South Africa here in Parliament. We saw the burning of our Parliament. Of course, a lone homeless man is being blamed for it and is being named as the suspect. In both instances, in the US, we were told that there was a lapse in security, there was bad security, and that's why we're able to see the Republicans storm into the capital like that. And in this instance in South Africa, why we're able to have this lone man coming into Parliament and burning down Parliament. I struggle to believe that it's an issue of security. At key points, at key places such as these, they are so well guarded. And even if they aren't as well guarded as they should be, there's intelligence. There's all sorts of protection for these particular buildings. How is it that people are easily able to penetrate these buildings suddenly without actually entertaining the issue of conspiracy theories, as I've said, unless this was always, part of the plan? Republicans have been saying that this was a part of the plan to let this happen so that we can then blame the Republicans. I mean, it's a crazy thing. It sounds like it. But one tends to look at these things and think, why was it so easy to penetrate such buildings when there is high level security for both in this particular instance?
Look, we're going to have a commission of inquiry into the violence in July, and there should be a judicial inquiry into the parliamentary burning, just as there's a judicial inquiry and a congressional inquiry into the events of January 6th in the United States. But I want to make a very fundamental distinction between the state capture danger here, which of course was almost simultaneous with the state capture in the United States. The state capture here is about greed and corruption. It's not fundamental to the democratic institutions. And we've just had Jacob Zuma, we've never had an American president, at least in jail for a brief period of time, which is extremely important. And you have now the Zondo Commission that just delivered the 800-page report on the nature of the kind of corruption which is so endemic and so much a risk to the democracy that is being consolidated here in South Africa. But it's much more fundamental what's going on in the United States with the Republican minority trying to entrench itself electorally and to also undermine the fundamentals of the judiciary's independence, to undermine the fundamentals of the electoral process so that one person and one vote is not the ideal that you're aspiring to. And that has to be fundamentally reformed. There has to be congressional action taken at some point to reform the Constitution of 1787 that has been amended several times, but is still woefully deficient in being a true democracy. And that's a fundamental difference to the state capture in the US as opposed to the state capture here.
All right, Prof. Stremlau, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for giving us your input here on SABC News. We appreciate your time, sir.